Edward Okonjo. I'm currently a lecturer at the Technical University of Kenya. I also double up as the country coordinator for the African Conversations in Kenya. And so here I want to present results of the findings from the African Conversations. This is a project that has been running for about 4 years right now. We had the first phase and the second phase. So I'll just put a disclaimer for African Conversations. Our aim is to inform. We are not pro or against gene drives, but ours is to bring forth the insights and the concerns that are there, even as we look forward to the development of the technology. So, over the past decade, we've seen a lot of efforts that have gone into malaria control. And one of the highlights is the fact that there are so many lives that have been saved from the early 2000s up to where we are right now. So if you quantify this, we actually see about 7.6 million lives that have been saved due to the concerted efforts that have been put into place in malaria control. However, we are not yet there. If you look at the global statistics of malaria, last year, according to the report by WHO, we have about 246 million cases. 94% of those cases are in the African region. The deaths that have been attributed to malaria stand at close to about 600,000. Unfortunately, again, 95% of this is in the African region. So in as much as we are making efforts towards malaria control, there is still a lot that needs to be done so that we can be able to upscale on this. So the success has actually been attributed to vector control initiatives, insecticide-treated bed nets, indoor residual spraying, issues of affordable diagnosis, and just case management. Improved livelihoods. Yesterday we heard about house modifications, and many of these things. And lastly, the issue of chemoprophylaxis. So these are just some of those efforts that have actually been put into place so that we can be able to control malaria. However, we have a lot of complications that have actually come up on this. We've had a lot of talks about the resistance to commonly used insecticides. This is something and a discussion that is ongoing. Also, the resistance due to the parasite itself on the commonly used drugs. We've always seen the first-line drugs changing all the time. Changes in mosquito behavior. Here we are looking at the biting patterns and adaptations on different ecological settings. There is also the issue of fatigue in the currently available control methods. There is that element of people getting tired because we always talk about malaria, and yet people are dying. And lastly, the high cost of procuring some of these interventions. So all these are challenges that are there in the fight against malaria. And the good thing is that 80% of all these gains in malaria control are actually attributed to the mosquito control intervention. So when we control the vector, then we are able to scale up to about 80% of all the gains in malaria control. However, additional efforts are needed so that we can speed up malaria elimination efforts. In Kenya, we have 3 species that are known to be dominant vectors. We have Anopheles gambiae, Anopheles funestus, and Anopheles arabiensis. So this is where we are now. A lot of efforts have come in, and we've talked about all the biocontrol technologies that are currently being practiced. Sterile insect technique, Wolbachia carrying mosquitoes, genetically modified sterile mosquitoes, and where we are, the gene drive modified mosquitoes. And this is where the African Conversations now come in. So, as I told you, much of this work had actually been done from around 2020 to 2022. And here, the basic understanding was just to get to explore the insights and recommendations of the African stakeholders on the potential of these gene drive mosquitoes. So getting an understanding of, do they know what gene drives are they aware of any modifications that are there? So a lot of insights that were gathered were actually in 25 countries across Africa. And this was just the first phase, and getting to know all these issues about gene drives and where we are. And the recommendations, you can actually get to read that paper that was there and follow up in terms of the recommendations that were there. But one of the key things that actually came out is that, yes, this was a multi-country survey for all the countries, but then there was need to get into now the country-specific issues about gene drives. What is in Kenya is different from what is in Malawi, it's different from what is in Nigeria, Ghana, and all that. So that's what led to this second phase, where we explored in-depth analysis of country-specific needs, the expectations and the opportunities, so that even as the developers are developing the product, then they can have all these insights and knowledge that people are talking about. So this was done in 5 countries, Nigeria, Cameroon, Kenya, 5, Malawi, Tanzania, Kenya, Cameroon, and Nigeria. What I can say here is that most of these insights in all these countries were very, very similar. We were able to pick up very similar issues that were arising from this. But I'll specifically present what was in Kenya, but we can extrapolate it in the other African countries. What are some of the stakeholders that we talked to? Research and academic institutions, regulatory agencies, vector control, media and youths, government ministries, and the community opinion leaders. The community opinion leaders here actually included even the religious fraternity, because they form a very important part in stakeholders because of the masses that they combine. We also had a session with some of the politicians, and so these are the people who will drive the agenda for gene drives at the time of implementation. So what did we look into? Just the malaria situation in Kenya. Are the stakeholders aware of what the malaria situation is in the country? What are some of their reactions? What are some of their concerns and uncertainties? How can it be integrated into the malaria control efforts? How and when to engage communities and stakeholders? And then how best to regulate and govern it? So these are some of the themes that we highlighted. And just a general outlook of the malaria situation in Kenya. Yes, most of the stakeholders were actually aware of the burden of the malaria situation in the country with high mortality, especially in children. But it is not uniform across the country, and we have about 5 epidemiological zones, and they're able to tell us some of those zones that have high incidence. One of the politicians actually told us that there is malaria all over the country because we have seen that sometimes some of those places that were hot, for example, an area like in Tharaka in Kenya, it did not have malaria throughout, so it was seasonal. But there has been an advent of irrigation schemes coming up, build-up of dams, and therefore, in his constituency, he could be able to see an increase in terms of the incidences of malaria. So they were aware of this malaria situation in the country. What are some of the views about gene drives? Yet, it actually fits within the intervected vector management strategies that targets malaria and other vector-borne diseases. Again, it's not a silver bullet and used mostly as a supplementary than a core technology. And what is important is that it needs to be tailor-made to the country situation and needs to be developed within the country, looking at all the factors and all the issues, prevalence, and all this. So it needs to be country-specific. Different approaches in different places based on evidence of the malaria profiles. In Kenya, we have 2 arms of government. We have the national government, and then we have the county government. So in terms of where the counties are, so the profiles for each county, once gotten, then that's how the approach of the release of the gene drive mosquitoes could actually be placed. Again, issues of evidence from other African countries, the ones who have developed this, and in case there are any releases, they can be used to make those informed decisions. Of course, there's a threat by the urban vector, and Fred Rose yesterday highlighted about Anopheles stephensii. So this is also an emerging issue that also needs to be put into consideration. So one of the public health officers actually told us that they have been involved in malaria control initiatives for a very long time. And then if we have the gene drives, it will actually be an alternative technology. And then why not try it? So it's a nice thing that can come and then can be used and incorporated into the other control interventions that we have. There were many concerns that were actually raised on this, on issues about whether it's parasite specific, is there a chance that it could become an invasive species, can you eliminate malaria but cause other havoc because maybe another parasite may be transmitted, what will happen to other competitive vectors, what are some of the adaptations that will be there, can suppressing one vector give room for the other one to thrive? These are key questions that actually came about. One of the religious leaders actually told us that what are the chances that the moment you interfere with the normal genetic makeup, you may predispose this mosquito, or you may make it better for this mosquito to transmit a different disease. A valid concern there. Issues of climate change in relation to this modified mosquito, also very important. So there's also the issue of capacity building and what comes out. So does Africa have the capacity in terms of expertise, facilities, resources, and regulations for this new technology? And how will it benefit Africa and the countries, the communities? Can it be developed within Africa to build capacity of the African scientists? So issues of capacity buildings was really highlighted. One of the senators, actually the youth senators, told us that the capacity for development and deployment is key in advancing this technology. And so there needs to be ownership within the scientists and researchers who then can be involved in training and ultimately increase the acceptance in Kenya. So this is very, very key and very important. The religious fraternity, as I said in one of the meetings that we had, that they were not opposed to this technology. There is no verse in the Bible or Quran that is against technological advancement. One of the religious leaders actually told us that creation is a process of becoming. God created us to become, and to become better every day. So we have been given that responsibility to continue with creation. So these are people who are, they have the buy-in, because it does not go against any religious ideology. And God has, God's creation is perfect, but he has given us the power to modify it. So genetic modification is something that can be looked into. The youth and advocacy group, they are very, very important stakeholders. One of the youth actually told us that Kenyans are very opinionated. They like to talk, they like to say everything. And democracy is open, and people like to exercise it. So we are programmed to oppose the government first. So if you want to pass this, go through the people first, not through the government, you know, and the like. So there was that push and shove in terms of who do you engage first. But one of the key things that was highlighted is actually the issue of the employment. What is the space of the youth in employment, especially when this technology is now deployed? We cannot rule out the issue of Gen Zs. Gen Zs are very, very, very informed. So it is important to include them as key stakeholders, apart from also using children as messengers of this technology. It is important that the public is engaged. So they say that in Kenya, government dictating to the people will not work. So you talk to the people, and then you can be able to pass all these. Issues of regulations. In Kenya, the National Biosafety Authority is actually the entry point. And so they help to regulate all issues of genetic modifications. So one of the key things is that There are guidelines for genome editing, but there is nothing yet for gene drives. So that is a key concern that was taken. We also have a rigorous post-release monitoring plan for these GMOs for about 20 years. So this can actually be also be adopted for the gene drives. It is important to handle issues of cross-regulatory areas with neighboring countries. As we said, a mosquito in Kenya does not know, so it can cross over to Uganda, Tanzania, and all that. And just establishing a pathway for data flow, financial flow, and information flow. Some of the key organs here that can actually be involved is NEPAD and maybe issues and AFIDEP, so that it becomes an intergovernmental agency for pushing this. Lastly, in terms of how to engage the stakeholders, so they told us that Kenya is currently very receptive to GM. The fact that the president is a botanist, so he may be able to pick it up and understand it very well and just push it down. Both approaches in terms of top-down and bottom-up can be good, and just having a concurrent for engaging the communities and also the public, very important. Issues of also talking with the neighboring countries to communicate the same message is something that was really highlighted. One of the key things about engaging the community is that you need to indicate how you're going to save money, the financial implications, because that is where you're going to have a buy-in. So what are the long-term cost-benefit projections that you have for this project? So that even as you engage, you tell them that when we have gene drives, we expect that this is going to be the impact, and financially you're able to translate that on the same. Issues of identifying champions, and you engage them fast. One of the issues that was highlighted is that scientists do not know how to squeeze themselves in those meetings where policies are made. Discussions on budget allocations, and where discussions on budget allocations are being done. We are too busy in our labs doing the science that ends nowhere, maybe to the shelves. So it's high time that we strategize. And then this also happens on how we communicate the same. So we need to know how to squeeze ourselves into those boardrooms where policies are actually made. In terms of engaging also on the community, some of the recommendations is that there is need to take advantage of social media platforms and also engage the social media influencers. And again, the issue of engaging the youths and the children. One of the key things that we were also told about public participation is that the problem in law is actually how to establish the threshold of public participation. So these are very key issues, so that then we don't run into any legal challenges because of not having a threshold for public participation. And then lastly, politicians. Nothing can happen until the political class is actually involved. So politics come faster than the law, and politicians are very convincing. They can sway the public in any way. It only takes one politician to say something negative about gene drives and we are done. So it is important that the politicians are actually involved. And one of the key things is that all this needs to be packaged within probably their terms. In Kenya, we have a 5-year term. So a politician will see sense when the information has actually been packaged within their term, because they're also looking at the money and the popularity. So they want quick results. So this information also needs to be packaged very well. So these are just some of the recommendations that actually took place, and thank you very much.